Marcus Chen stood in the rain-soaked parking lot of Westfield High School, his work boots splashing through puddles as he rushed toward the sound of cruel laughter. What he saw next would change everything he thought he knew about courage, kindness, and the invisible threads that connect our lives in ways we never imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the cramped apartment at exactly 5:30 a.m. Marcus Chen's calloused hand slammed down on the snooze button before the sound could wake his 8-year-old son Dylan, who was still curled up in the twin bed across their shared bedroom. The apartment's heating system had been acting up again, and Marcus could see his breath in the chilly morning air as he quietly pulled on his work clothes. Marcus had been working as a maintenance supervisor at Pinnacle Technologies for 3 years now, ever since the divorce papers were finalized, and he'd found himself suddenly responsible for raising Dylan on his own. The job wasn't glamorous. Fixing broken air conditioning units, replacing burnt-out fluorescent lights, and ensuring the sprawling corporate campus ran smoothly. But it paid enough to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. He moved through their small kitchen with practiced silence, preparing Dylan's lunch and his own thermos of coffee. The routine was sacred to him now. Every morning he'd pack Dylan's favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich, add a juice box and some crackers, then leave a small note in the lunchbox. Today's note read, "Remember, buddy, you're braver than you believe. Love, Dad." By 6:15 a.m., Marcus was already in his pickup truck, driving through the quiet streets of Millbrook toward the imposing glass towers of Pinnacle Technologies. The company's headquarters sat on a 40-acre campus on the outskirts of town, a testament to the success of what had started as a small software company 25 years ago. Now, Pinnacle was a Fortune 500 corporation with offices in 12 countries, and Marcus took pride in keeping their flagship facility running smoothly. The security guard, Pete Rodriguez, waved him through the main gate. They'd developed a friendly rapport over the years, often chatting about their kids during shift changes. Pete's daughter was a freshman at Westfield High, the same school Dylan would attend in a few years. Marcus parked in the designated maintenance area and grabbed his tool bag from the truck bed. The November morning was crisp, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The weather forecast had called for heavy rain by afternoon, which meant he'd likely be dealing with the notorious leak in Building C's east wing before the day was over. His first stop was the main lobby, where he needed to replace several burnt-out bulbs in the impressive chandelier that hung above the reception area. As he set up his ladder, early arriving employees began filtering through the marble-floored entrance. Most barely acknowledged his presence. He was part of the invisible workforce that kept their world functioning smoothly. Sarah Martinez, one of the few executives who actually knew his name, stopped by his ladder around 8 a.m. "Morning, Marcus. How's Dylan doing with his new school year?" Marcus smiled down at her from his perch near the chandelier. Sarah was the VP of Human Resources, a genuinely kind woman who remembered details about people's lives. "He's doing great, thanks for asking. Made the honor roll last month." "That's wonderful. You should be proud." "I am," Marcus replied carefully, threading a new LED bulb into its socket. "Sometimes I worry I'm not doing enough for him, you know. Single parenting isn't exactly something they teach you in school." Sarah's expression softened. "From what I can see, you're doing an amazing job. That boy's lucky to have you." After Sarah continued on her way, Marcus finished with the chandelier and moved on to his next task, investigating reports of a malfunctioning elevator in Building B. The corporate campus was like a small city with thousands of employees spread across multiple buildings connected by covered walkways and landscaped courtyards. As he worked on the elevator's control panel, Marcus couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from passing employees. There was talk of a major board meeting scheduled for later in the week, something about a potential merger that had everyone on edge. Job security was always a concern in the corporate world, and Marcus had learned to keep his ears open for any hints about layoffs or restructuring. Around 10 a.m., his radio crackled to life. "Marcus, we've got a situation in the executive conference room on the 15th floor, came the voice of his supervisor, Janet Williams. "The climate control system is acting up again, and they've got important meetings all day." Marcus gathered his tools and headed for the elevator. The 15th floor was executive territory, a place where million-dollar decisions were made and where maintenance staff were expected to work quickly and invisibly. The elevator doors opened to reveal polished hardwood floors, expensive artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. The conference room was already uncomfortably warm when Marcus arrived. A group of executives in expensive suits were setting up for what looked like a crucial presentation, their faces showing the stress of high-stakes business dealings. Marcus worked efficiently, diagnosing the problem with the thermostat and making the necessary adjustments. "Excuse me," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see a woman in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed and carrying herself with the unmistakable confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "How long will this take? We have a board presentation in 30 minutes. "Just a few more minutes, ma'am," Marcus replied politely. "The system should be cooling down shortly." The woman nodded curtly and returned to her preparations. Marcus had seen her around the building before, but didn't know her name or position. In his world, the executive hierarchy was largely anonymous, faces he recognized but couldn't place in the corporate structure. By lunchtime, Marcus had completed his rounds of the main buildings and was catching up on paperwork in the small maintenance office tucked away in the basement of Building A. The space was cramped but functional, with metal shelves lined with spare parts, cleaning supplies, and the various tools of his trade. His phone buzzed with a text message from Dylan's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. "Dylan did excellent work on his science project today. You should be proud of his dedication." Marcus smiled as he typed back a quick thank you. These small victories meant everything to him. Every good grade, every positive comment from a teacher, every smile on Dylan's face when he picked him up. From after-school care, they were proof that despite the challenges of single parenthood, he was doing something right. The afternoon brought the predicted rain, arriving with the force of a minor hurricane. By 2 p.m., Marcus was wading through ankle-deep water in the parking garage, working to clear a blocked storm drain. The maintenance team was stretched thin, with emergency calls coming in from across the campus. Around 3:30 p.m., just as he was finishing up with the drainage issue, his radio crackled again. "Marcus, we need you at Westfield High School. There's been a situation with the heating system in the main building, and the principal specifically requested you." Marcus was surprised by the request. Pinnacle Technologies had a contract to maintain the HVAC systems at several local schools, but emergency calls were usually handled by whoever was available. The fact that they'd asked for him specifically was unusual. He gathered his tools and drove the 10 minutes to Westfield High School, a sprawling brick complex that served nearly 2,000 students. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the parking lot into a series of interconnected puddles. Marcus parked near the main entrance and jogged through the downpour, his tool bag slung over his shoulder. Inside, the hallways echoed with the controlled chaos of a typical school day winding down. Students were at their lockers, teachers were preparing for after-school activities, and the familiar sounds of adolescent conversation filled the air. Marcus found the principal's office and was directed to the gymnasium, where the heating system had apparently failed completely. The gym was indeed freezing, with visible condensation forming on the windows and the basketball court slick with moisture. Marcus spent the next hour diagnosing and repairing a failed heating element, working methodically despite the uncomfortable conditions. As he packed up his tools around 5 p.m., the rain outside had intensified to near torrential levels. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the parking lot was now more lake than asphalt. Marcus pulled his hood up and prepared to make a run for his truck when he heard something that made him pause. Through the sound of the storm, he could hear voices. Young voices, and they didn't sound friendly. Peering around the corner of the building, Marcus saw a group of teenagers huddled under the overhang of the school's side entrance. At first glance, it looked like kids waiting for rides, but something about the body language was wrong. 3 boys, probably 16 or 17 years old, had cornered a girl against the brick wall. She was younger, maybe 14, with long dark hair plastered to her face by the rain. Even from a distance, Marcus could see she was crying. "Come on, scholarship girl," one of the boys was saying, his voice carrying easily through the rain. "Where's your fancy car today? Oh, wait, that's right. Your daddy doesn't drive you to school in a Mercedes like the rest of us." The girl tried to step away, but another boy moved to block her path. "I heard your dad works at some boring office job. Must be embarrassing, having to go to school with kids whose parents actually matter." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd seen enough bullying in his own childhood to recognize the dynamics at play. The girl was clearly outnumbered and trapped, with no easy way to escape. The boys were using the storm as cover, knowing that most students and teachers had already left. "Oh, for the day, please just leave me alone," the girl said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I haven't done anything to you." "You exist," the third boy said with a cruel laugh. "That's enough. This school would be a lot better without scholarship kids like you cluttering up the place." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus had heard enough. Without thinking about the potential consequences, he stepped out from his hiding spot and walked directly toward the group. His boots splashed loudly in the puddles, and his tall frame cut an imposing figure in the grey afternoon light. "Hey!" he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years dealing with difficult situations. "What's going on here?" The 3 boys turned in surprise, their confident demeanors immediately shifting to uncertainty. They hadn't expected an adult to witness their harassment, and Marcus's work clothes and serious expression made it clear he wasn't someone to be dismissed easily. "Nothing, sir," the apparent leader of the group said, forcing a fake smile. "We were just talking." Marcus looked at the girl, who was still pressed against the wall, tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. Her relief was palpable. Someone had finally intervened. "Talking?" Marcus repeated, his tone making it clear he wasn't buying their story. "Looked more like 3 against 1 to me. That's not talking, that's bullying." The boys exchanged nervous glances. They were clearly from affluent families, probably used to getting away with behavior like this because of their parents' social status. But Marcus didn't care about their connections or their parents' money. "Look, we don't want any trouble," one of the boys said, already backing away. "We were just leaving anyway." "Good idea," Marcus replied firmly. "And if I hear about any of you bothering this young lady again, we're going to have a much longer conversation. Understood?" The boys nodded quickly and hurried away through the rain, their bravado completely evaporated. Marcus watched them go, then turned his attention to the girl, who was still standing against the wall, looking shocked by the sudden turn of events. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his demeanor completely different now that the threat was gone. "Did they hurt you?" The girl shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "No, they didn't hit me or anything. They do this sometimes, say mean things." Marcus felt a surge of anger at the casual way she described the harassment, as if it were just a normal part of her school experience. No kid should have to accept bullying as routine. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," she replied quietly. "Emma Richardson." "Well, Emma, I'm Marcus, and I want you to know that what those boys were doing isn't okay. You don't deserve to be treated like that, regardless of what they think about your family or your background." Emma looked up at him, with eyes that seemed older than her 14 years. "They do it because they know I can't fight back. Their parents donate money to the school, and mine, well, my dad just works a regular job." Marcus felt his heart break a little at the resignation in her voice. This girl had been conditioned to believe that her worth was somehow less than that of her wealthier classmates. "Your dad's job doesn't determine your value as a person," Marcus said firmly, "and neither does your family's bank account. You belong here just as much as anyone else." For the first time since he'd approached, Emma smiled slightly. "Thank you for helping me. Most adults they don't want to get involved." "Well, I'm not most adults," Marcus replied, "and I have a son not much younger than you. I'd hope someone would step in if he was in trouble." The rain was still coming down hard, and Marcus realized they were both getting soaked standing there. "Do you have a ride home? It's pretty nasty out here." Emma shook her head. "I usually take the bus, but it doesn't run when the weather's this bad. I was going to call my dad, but—" She gestured helplessly at the storm. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Come on, I'll give you a ride. My truck's right over there." Emma looked uncertain. "I don't know if I should. I mean, I don't really know you." Marcus understood her caution. It was smart for a young girl to be wary of strangers offering rides. "Tell you what," he said, pulling out his phone. "Call your dad right now and tell him what happened. Let him know that Marcus Chen from Pinnacle Technologies is offering to drive you home. If he's okay with it, then we'll go. If not, we'll figure out another solution." Emma's face showed surprise at his approach. Most adults would have been offended by her hesitation, but Marcus was treating her concerns with respect. She took out her own phone and dialed a number. "Dad? It's me. Listen, something happened at school." She quickly explained the situation. With the bullies and Marcus's intervention, then waited while her father apparently asked questions. "His name is Marcus Chen, and he works at Pinnacle Technologies." "Yes, I'm sure. Okay, I'll ask him." She looked up at Marcus. "My dad wants to know if you can give him your employee ID number." Marcus recited the number without hesitation. "Employee ID 4472, hired 3 years ago, clean record, solid performance reviews." He waited while Emma relayed the information. After a few more minutes of conversation, Emma hung up and looked relieved. "He said, okay, he's going to call Pinnacle to verify, but he trusts you. He also said to tell you thank you for helping me." "No thanks necessary," Marcus replied. "Come on. Let's get you out of this rain." They ran through the parking lot to Marcus's pickup truck, both of them laughing despite the circumstances as they splashed through the deepening puddles. Marcus opened the passenger door for Emma and made sure she was settled before climbing into the driver's seat. The truck's interior was clean, but clearly belonged to a working man. A few tools on the floor, a coffee mug in the cup holder, and a photo of Dylan taped to the dashboard. Emma noticed the photo immediately. "Is that your son?" she asked. "That's Dylan," Marcus replied proudly, starting the engine and turning up the heat. "He's 8, 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary. He looks like a sweet kid," Emma said, and Marcus could hear genuine warmth in her voice. As they drove through the storm-darkened streets, Emma gave Marcus directions to her neighborhood. To his surprise, she lived in Hilltop Estates, one of the most exclusive areas of town. The houses there were massive, with perfectly manicured lawns and circular driveways designed for luxury cars. "Turn left at the next street," Emma said quietly. "It's the 4th house on the right." Marcus pulled into a driveway that curved past a fountain and up to a house that could only be described as a mansion. The architecture was modern and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows and clean lines that spoke of expensive taste and unlimited budget. "This is your house?" Marcus asked, unable to hide his surprise. Emma's expression grew uncomfortable. "Yeah, I know what you're thinking. If we live here, why do those boys call me scholarship girl?" Marcus shook his head. "I wasn't thinking anything judgmental. I'm just surprised, that's all." Emma sighed. "It's complicated. My dad, he works really hard, and we're comfortable, but we're not old money like the families of those boys. They think there's a difference between earning your wealth and inheriting it." Before Marcus could respond, the front door of the house opened, and a man came running out through the rain. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit despite the late hour. His face showed a mixture of concern and relief as he approached the truck. Marcus rolled down his window as the man reached them. "Mr. Richardson, I'm Marcus Chen." "Thank you," the man said immediately, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "Emma told me what happened. I can't thank you enough for stepping in." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Marcus replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Mr. Richardson's eyes showed he understood the significance of what Marcus had done. "No, not everyone would have. Most people would have minded their own business. You could have walked away, but you chose to help my daughter. That says something about your character." Emma opened the truck door and prepared to get out. "Thanks for the ride, Marcus, and thanks for, everything." "You take care of yourself, Emma," Marcus replied, "and remember what I said. You belong anywhere you want to be." Mr. Richardson walked his daughter to the door, then returned to Marcus's truck. The rain was still falling steadily, but he seemed oblivious to it. "I know this might sound forward," he said, "but I'd like to do something to thank you properly. Maybe take you and your son to dinner sometime?" Marcus was touched by the offer, but felt uncomfortable accepting anything in return for what he considered basic human decency. "That's very kind of you, but really not necessary. I'm just glad Emma's safe." "Please," Mr. Richardson insisted. "It would mean a lot to me. Emma's been having a tough time at school, and what you did today, it's the first time in months I've seen her smile when talking about school." Something in the man's voice made Marcus reconsider. This wasn't about payment or obligation. It was about one father reaching out to another. "All right," Marcus said. "Finally. That would be nice. Thank you." They exchanged phone numbers, and Mr. Richardson promised to call soon to arrange dinner. As Marcus drove away from the impressive house, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more significant than it seemed on the surface. The storm was beginning to clear as he drove back to his own modest neighborhood. By the time he reached his apartment complex, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and patches of blue sky were visible between the clouds. Dylan was waiting for him in their small living room, surrounded by homework and art supplies. "Dad! How was work? Mrs. Patterson said you got my note about my science project." Marcus scooped his son into a hug, feeling the familiar surge of love and protective instinct that came with single parenthood. "Work was interesting today, buddy. Very interesting. Tell me about this science project." As Dylan launched into an excited explanation of his volcano model, Marcus found his thoughts drifting back to Emma Richardson. There had been something about her father that nagged at him, something familiar, though he couldn't place it. The name Richardson meant nothing to him, but he had the odd feeling that their paths had crossed before, somehow. He pushed the thought aside and focused on Dylan's animated description of lava flow and chemical reactions. This was his real world: homework help, bedtime stories, and the simple joy of watching his son discover new things. The corporate world of Pinnacle Technologies, with its boardrooms and executive decisions, felt very far away from their small apartment. But as he helped Dylan with his math homework later that evening, Marcus couldn't entirely shake the feeling that his encounter with Emma Richardson was going to change something fundamental about his life. He just had no idea how dramatically those changes would unfold, or how closely his own future was already intertwined with the grateful father who had stood in the rain, thanking him for protecting his daughter. The following week passed in its usual rhythm of early mornings and long work days. Marcus had almost forgotten about his encounter with Emma Richardson when his phone rang on Thursday evening. He was helping Dylan practice his spelling words when the unfamiliar number appeared on his screen. "Marcus, this is James Richardson, Emma's father. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Marcus gestured for Dylan to continue reading while he stepped into the kitchen. "Not at all, Mr. Richardson. How's Emma doing?" "Much better, actually. She's been talking about what you said to her all week. Something about belonging anywhere she wants to be." James's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there during their brief meeting in the rain. "I was wondering if you and your son might be free for dinner this Saturday. There's a great family restaurant downtown, Millstone Grill. My treat, of course." Marcus glanced back at Dylan, who was now drawing pictures of dinosaurs in the margins of his spelling worksheet. Saturday evenings were usually reserved for father-son time. Pizza, a movie, maybe a trip to the local arcade. But there was something genuinely appealing about James's invitation. "That sounds wonderful," Marcus replied. "Dylan loves trying new restaurants. What time works for you?" They settled on 6 o'clock, and James promised to make reservations. After hanging up, Marcus found himself curious about this dinner. James Richardson seemed like a decent man, clearly devoted to his daughter, but there was an underlying intensity about him that suggested more complexity beneath the surface. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn weather and clear skies. Dylan had spent the morning at his friend Tommy's house, returning home full of stories about video games and bike riding. As they got ready for dinner, Dylan peppered his father with questions about their mysterious dinner companions. "So this girl Emma was being picked on by mean kids?" Dylan asked, struggling with the buttons on his best shirt. "That's right," Marcus replied, helping him with the stubborn button. "And her dad wanted to thank us for helping her." "Is she nice?" Marcus smiled at his son's straightforward approach to social situations. "She seemed very nice. A little sad, but nice." Millstone Grill occupied a converted Victorian mansion in the heart of downtown, its warm lighting and elegant atmosphere making it one of the area's most popular family restaurants. Marcus and Dylan arrived exactly on time, both dressed in their best casual clothes, khakis and button-down shirts that Marcus had ironed carefully that afternoon. The hostess led them to a table near the fireplace, where James Richardson was already waiting with Emma. Father and daughter both stood as they approached, and Marcus was struck again by the obvious close relationship between them. "Marcus! Dylan!" James extended his hand warmly. "Thank you so much for joining us." Emma had transformed from the tearful, rain-soaked girl Marcus remembered. Her dark hair was neatly styled, and she wore a simple blue dress that made her look older than her 14 years. But her smile was genuine as she greeted them. "Hi, Marcus. And you must be Dylan," she said, crouching down to Dylan's eye level. "Your dad told me you're really smart and good at school." Dylan beamed under the attention. At 8 years old, he was naturally friendly, but sometimes shy around new people. Emma's gentle approach immediately put him at ease. "I made an honor roll," Dylan announced proudly, "and I'm building a volcano for the science fair." "That's so cool." Emma's enthusiasm seemed completely authentic. "What kind of volcano? Are you going to make it erupt?" As Dylan launched into an excited explanation of his project, Marcus and James settled into their seats. The restaurant buzzed with the comfortable sounds of families enjoying their Saturday evening meals, and Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Emma's been looking forward to this all week, James said quietly, watching his daughter interact with Dylan. She doesn't get many chances to be around younger kids. Most of her classmates are... He paused, seeming to search for diplomatic words. Older and less kind, Marcus suggested. James nodded with a rueful expression. Unfortunately, yes. The social dynamics at Westfield can be challenging. Emma's incredibly bright. She's taking advanced classes with juniors and seniors, but academically gifted 14-year-olds don't always fit in socially. Marcus watched Emma helping Dylan look at the children's menu, pointing out pictures and reading descriptions aloud. She had a natural warmth with children that suggested she might be dealing with loneliness at school. Being smart can be tough at that age, Marcus observed, especially when other kids feel threatened by it. Exactly. And Emma's situation is complicated by other factors. James lowered his voice slightly. The boys who were bothering her come from families that have been wealthy for generations. Old money, as they say. They see anyone who's achieved success more recently as somehow less legitimate. The waiter arrived to take their orders, providing a natural break in the conversation. Dylan chose chicken fingers with elaborate care, while Emma opted for a Caesar salad, explaining to Dylan that it was named after a Roman emperor. James ordered the salmon, and Marcus chose the house special, a steak that cost more than he usually spent on groceries for a week. "So, Marcus," James said once the waiter had left, "tell me about your work at Pinnacle. Emma mentioned you work in maintenance there." Marcus nodded, suddenly aware that his job might seem mundane to someone who could afford to live in Hilltop. "Estates. I'm a maintenance supervisor. Been there about 3 years now. It's good work, keeps the buildings running, fixes problems when they come up." "That's important work," James said, with what seemed like genuine respect. "A place like Pinnacle couldn't function without people who understand how all the systems work." There was something in James's tone that suggested more than polite conversation. Marcus had the odd feeling that James knew more about Pinnacle technologies than he was letting on, but he couldn't imagine how or why. Emma had moved on from helping Dylan with his menu to asking about his school and friends. She listened with the focused attention of someone who remembered what it was like to be 8 years old and full of stories about playground adventures and classroom dramas. "Do you ever get scared at school?" Dylan asked suddenly, his child's intuition picking up on something in Emma's demeanor. Emma's smile faltered slightly, and she glanced at her father before answering. "Sometimes. But your dad taught me something important. That I belong anywhere. I want to be. So when I get scared, I remember that." Marcus felt a warm glow at hearing his words repeated. He'd spoken to them instinctively in the rain-soaked parking lot, but they had clearly resonated with Emma in a meaningful way. "My dad says that to me too," Dylan announced. "He says I can do anything if I work hard and don't give up." James smiled at this exchange. "Your father sounds like a wise man, Dylan." Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Dylan entertained them with stories about his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, and his best friend, Tommy. Emma shared carefully edited stories about her classes, focusing on the academic challenges rather than the social difficulties. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying James's company. The man was clearly intelligent and successful, but he wore his achievements lightly. He asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's work and seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects of building maintenance. The heating and cooling system in a building like Pinnacle must be incredibly complex, James observed. "How do you keep track of all the different zones and requirements?" Marcus launched into an explanation of the computerized control systems, the backup protocols, and the seasonal adjustments needed to maintain comfort for thousands of employees. As he talked, he noticed James listening with the kind of focused attention that suggested more than casual interest. "It sounds like you really understand the facility inside and out," James said when Marcus finished. "That kind of institutional knowledge must be invaluable." Again, Marcus had the feeling there was more to James's comments than simple conversation. But before he could dwell on it, Dylan captured everyone's attention by attempting to explain his volcano project using salt shakers and sugar packets as visual aids. Emma was delighted by Dylan's presentation, asking questions that showed she understood the science behind the eruption. Her advanced academic placement was evident in the sophisticated way she discussed chemical reactions with an 8-year-old, never talking down to him but helping him think through the concepts. "You're really good with kids," Marcus told her. During a quiet moment while Dylan and James discussed the mechanics of model volcanoes, Emma blushed slightly. "I like kids. They're honest and curious about everything. They don't care about things like what car your parents drive or where you live." The comment revealed more about Emma's school experience than she probably intended. Marcus could see the loneliness behind her mature exterior. A brilliant girl caught between her intellectual capabilities and her emotional age, struggling to find her place in a world that valued superficial markers of status over substance. As the evening wound down, James insisted on paying the check despite Marcus's protests. "Please," he said firmly, "this has been one of the most enjoyable evenings Emma and I have had in months. Thank you for giving us the chance to get to know you both." Outside the restaurant, Dylan was beginning to show signs of 8-year-old fatigue, leaning against Marcus's leg while the adults talked. Emma crouched down to say goodbye to him at his eye level. "I had so much fun talking to you tonight, Dylan. Will you tell me how your volcano turns out?" Dylan nodded sleepily. "Maybe you can come see it when it's done." Emma looked up at Marcus, questioningly. Would that be okay? Marcus found himself nodding before he'd fully considered the implications. Of course. Dylan would love to show off his project. James and Emma walked them to Marcus's pickup truck, and James shook hands with both father and son. "Thank you again for everything, for helping Emma last week, and for this wonderful evening." As they drove home through the quiet streets, Dylan chatted sleepily about Emma and how smart she was, and how she knew about volcanoes and Roman emperors. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half puzzling over the evening's undercurrents. James Richardson was clearly more than just a concerned father, grateful for help with his daughter. There had been moments during their conversation when Marcus felt like he was being evaluated, though for what purpose he couldn't imagine, and James's knowledge about pinnacle technologies seemed unusually detailed for someone with no connection to the company. "Dad?" Dylan's voice interrupted his thoughts. Emma seemed sad sometimes, even when she was smiling. Marcus glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, once again impressed by the boy's emotional intelligence. "What made you think that?" "Her eyes," Dylan said simply. They looked sad when she talked about school. Back at their apartment, as Marcus helped Dylan get ready for bed, he found himself thinking about Emma's situation. 14 was a difficult age under the best circumstances, but being academically advanced in a socially challenging environment must be particularly isolating. "Dad," Dylan said as Marcus tucked him into bed, "can we really have Emma come see my volcano?" "If she wants to, and if her father says it's okay," Marcus replied. "Good. I think she needs more friends." After Dylan fell asleep, Marcus sat in their small living room with a cup of coffee, thinking about the evening. The dinner had been pleasant, but it had left him with more questions than answers about James Richardson, and his obvious wealth contrasted with Emma's treatment as an outsider at school. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Marcus, this is Emma. Dad gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say thank you again for tonight. It was really fun. Tell Dylan I meant what I said about seeing his volcano. Emma." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "It was fun. For us too. Dylan's already planning his volcano demonstration for you. Take care, and remember what we talked about." Her response came quickly. "I will. You and Dylan are really special people. Thank you for reminding me that there are still kind people in the world." Marcus set his phone aside, feeling a mixture of warmth and concern. Emma was clearly a remarkable young woman, but she was carrying burdens that no 14-year-old should have to bear. The bullying at school was just the visible symptom of deeper issues with acceptance and belonging. As he prepared for bed, Marcus made a mental note to check on Emma when he could. Maybe he'd see her around Westfield High during his occasional maintenance calls there. It wouldn't hurt to keep an eye out for her, just to make sure those boys weren't bothering her again. He had no way of knowing that his growing friendship with Emma Richardson was about to intersect with his professional life in ways that would challenge everything he thought he knew about corporate hierarchies, personal relationships, and the sometimes invisible connections that bind people's lives together. Monday morning arrived with the familiar routine of early alarms and quick breakfasts. Marcus was reviewing his work schedule for the week when his supervisor, Janet Williams, called with an unusual request. "Marcus, I need you to attend a facilities meeting this Thursday. It's in the main conference room on the 15th floor. You know, the one you fixed the climate control for last week." Marcus was surprised. Maintenance staff were rarely included in meetings beyond their immediate department. What kind of meeting? Something about facility improvements and long-term planning. They specifically requested someone with your level of experience and knowledge of the building systems. Apparently, there are some big changes coming, and they want input from people who actually understand how everything works. As Marcus hung up the phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that his simple, predictable world was about to become much more complicated. He just didn't realize how dramatically his life was about to change, or how closely his fate was already intertwined with the Richardson family in ways that went far beyond a chance encounter in a rain-soaked parking lot. Thursday morning brought an unexpected nervousness that Marcus couldn't quite shake. The facilities meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., and he'd spent the previous evening reviewing building schematics and maintenance records, wanting to be prepared for whatever questions might come his way. It wasn't often that maintenance staff were included in high-level planning discussions, and he didn't want to waste the opportunity to represent his department well. Dylan had noticed his father's distraction over breakfast. "You seem worried." "About something, Dad." Marcus ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "Just a big meeting at work today, buddy. Nothing to worry about." "Will you tell me about it tonight?" "Absolutely," Marcus promised, though he had no idea how eventful that conversation would turn out to be. The morning passed quickly with routine maintenance tasks. Marcus replaced a malfunctioning card reader in Building B, responded to a minor plumbing issue in the executive break room, and completed his weekly inspection of the backup generator systems. Normal work that kept his hands busy, while his mind wandered to the upcoming meeting. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus made his way to the 15th floor, carrying a folder with building system diagrams and his maintenance log summaries. The elevator ride seemed longer than usual, and he found himself checking his appearance in the polished steel doors. His work uniform was clean and pressed, his tool belt left behind in favor of a more professional appearance. The executive conference room was already occupied when he arrived. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see approximately 15 people seated around the massive mahogany table. Most were familiar faces from the upper management ranks. Sarah Martinez from HR, the chief financial officer whose name he'd never learned, and several department heads he recognized but couldn't name. Janet Williams was waiting for him outside the conference room. "You ready for this, Marcus? Just be yourself and answer their questions honestly." They specifically want practical input about the building systems. Marcus nodded, straightening his shoulders. What exactly are they planning? I'm not entirely sure, Janet admitted. Something about expanding operations and upgrading facilities. They want to know what our current systems can handle and what would need to be modified. The conference room doors opened, and Sarah Martinez emerged to greet them. Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. Please come in. Marcus followed her into the room, immediately struck by the formality of the setting. The conference table was surrounded by leather chairs, and the walls featured large monitors displaying what appeared to be architectural plans and financial projections. The afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in a warm, professional glow. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Marcus Chen, our maintenance supervisor, Sarah announced. Marcus has been with Pinnacle for 3 years and has extensive knowledge of our facility systems. Marcus nodded politely as various executives acknowledged his presence. Most seemed genuinely interested in his expertise, though he could sense the invisible barrier between management and labor that existed even in friendly interactions. Please have a seat, came a voice from the head of the table. Marcus looked up to see a man in an expensive navy suit gesturing to an empty chair. The man looked familiar, though Marcus couldn't immediately place him. There was something about his bearing and the way others in the room deferred to him that suggested significant authority. As Marcus settled into his chair, the man at the head of the table began speaking. We're here today to discuss some exciting developments for Pinnacle Technologies. We're planning a significant expansion of our operations, which will require substantial upgrades to our physical infrastructure. Marcus listened attentively as the presentation unfolded. Pinnacle was apparently considering a major acquisition that would bring an additional 3,000 employees to the campus. The current facilities would need extensive modifications to accommodate the increased capacity. The question we need to answer, the presenter continued, is whether our existing systems can support this growth, and if not, what modifications would be required. Sarah Martinez turned to Marcus. This is where your expertise becomes invaluable, Marcus. You know these buildings better than anyone. What's your assessment of our current capacity? Marcus felt all eyes in the room turn to him. He cleared his throat and opened his folder, grateful for the preparation he'd done the night before. Our electrical infrastructure is currently operating at about 70% capacity, he began, his voice gaining confidence as he moved into familiar territory. We could probably handle another 1,000 people without major upgrades, but 3,000 would require significant expansion of the main electrical service. He pulled out a building schematic and pointed to key areas. The HVAC system is more complex. Buildings A and C could handle increased loads with some modifications to the ductwork and additional units on the roof, but Building B would need a complete system overhaul. The current setup is already struggling during peak summer months. The room was quiet, except for the scratch of pens on notepads. Marcus continued his analysis, covering everything from parking capacity to water, pressure to network infrastructure. His 3 years of hands-on experience with every system in the complex had given him insights that no consultant could match. What about the timeline for these modifications? Asked the CFO. Marcus considered the question carefully. If we start immediately, I'd estimate 18 months for the electrical upgrades, maybe 2 years for the complete HVAC overhaul. The key would be sequencing the work to minimize disruption to current operations. And the cost estimates? This question came from the man at the head of the table, whose voice carried unmistakable authority. That's outside my expertise, Marcus admitted. But I can tell you which systems would need complete replacement versus modification, which would help with accurate cost projections. The presentation continued for another hour, with Marcus fielding detailed questions about everything from backup power systems to emergency evacuation procedures. He found himself increasingly impressed by the scope of the expansion plans. Pinnacle was clearly positioning itself for major growth. As the meeting began to wind down, the man at the head of the table stood up. "Thank you all for your input today. This has been extremely valuable for our planning process." He turned directly to Marcus. "Particularly your insights, Marcus. It's clear that you have a deep understanding of our facilities. Would you be available for follow-up consultations as we develop these plans?" Marcus felt a surge of professional pride. "Of course, sir. Whatever you need." The man smiled, extending his hand. "Excellent. I'm James Richardson, by the way, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies." The world seemed to stop. Marcus felt his hand automatically extend to shake James's, but his mind was reeling. James Richardson, CEO. Emma's father was the Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Technologies, the man who, quite literally, owned Marcus's job. "It's nice to meet you, sir," Marcus managed, his voice somehow remaining steady despite the shock. James's grip was firm, his smile genuine. "Actually, Marcus, we've met before, last Saturday at Millstone Grill. Though I suppose the context is a bit different now." The room had fallen quiet, with other attendees clearly sensing some undercurrent they didn't understand. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks as the full implications of the situation hit him. "You're Emma's father," Marcus said unnecessarily, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am indeed," James replied calmly. "And you're the man who protected my daughter from bullies and then had dinner with us. Small world, isn't it?" Marcus's mind raced through the events of the past week. The dinner conversation now took on entirely new meaning. James's detailed questions about Pinnacle's systems, his knowledge of the building operations, his careful evaluation of Marcus's expertise, it all made sense now. "I had no idea," Marcus said, feeling foolish for stating the obvious. James's expression softened slightly. "Of course you didn't. How could you? I'm sorry for not introducing myself properly at dinner, but honestly, it was refreshing to have a conversation without the weight of corporate hierarchy involved." Sarah Martinez was watching this exchange with obvious confusion. "I'm sorry, but could someone explain what's happening here?" James addressed the room without taking his eyes off Marcus. "It turns out that Marcus here recently helped my daughter, Emma, when she was having some trouble at school. We had dinner together last weekend, though neither of us realized the connection to Pinnacle at the time." The room buzzed with murmurs of surprise and interest. Marcus felt exposed, as if everyone was suddenly re-evaluating their perception of him based on this unexpected revelation. "That's quite a coincidence," observed the CFO. "Indeed it is," James agreed. "Though I have to say, everything Marcus shared with us today confirms what I learned about his character last Saturday. He's thorough, knowledgeable, and genuinely cares about doing things right." Marcus felt simultaneously flattered and uncomfortable. The praise was gratifying, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his relationship with Emma and James had somehow compromised his professional integrity. "Sir," Marcus began, "I want you to know that I had no idea who you were when I helped Emma, and I certainly didn't know during our dinner." James nodded approvingly, "Which is exactly why your actions mean so much. You helped my daughter because it was the right thing to do, not because you thought it might benefit you professionally." The meeting officially ended a few minutes later, with various executives filing out while discussing the expansion plans in small groups. Marcus found himself alone with James, who had remained seated at the head of the table. "This is awkward," Marcus said honestly. James laughed, a sound that seemed to release some of the tension in the room. "It doesn't have to be. Marcus, what you did for Emma last week, that meant everything to me. She's been struggling at school, feeling like she doesn't belong anywhere. What you told her about belonging wherever she wants to be, that's changed." Her entire attitude. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I just said what felt right at the moment. Exactly. You saw a young person in trouble and stepped in to help, despite having no obligation to do so. You treated her with respect and dignity when 3 boys were trying to tear down her self-worth. James's voice carried deep emotion. Do you have any idea how rare that kind of character is? I'd hope it's not that rare, Marcus replied. Unfortunately it is, especially in my world. James gestured around the elegant conference room. When you have money and power, you learn quickly who's being genuine and who's performing. You and Dylan were completely authentic with us at dinner. That's precious beyond measure. Marcus felt a new kind of discomfort. Sir, I need you to know that I don't expect any special treatment because of this. I want to earn whatever opportunities come my way. James studied him for a long moment. What if I told you that your performance in today's meeting, your knowledge, your insights, your professionalism, had already earned you something special? What do you mean? We're going to need a director of facilities management for the expansion project. Someone who understands our current systems inside and out. Someone who can oversee the upgrades and modifications. Based on what I heard today, you're the obvious choice. Marcus felt his heart racing. A director-level position would change everything. For him and Dylan, better salary, better benefits, more stability. But accepting it now felt complicated by his relationship with Emma and James. I appreciate the confidence, sir, but I need to think about whether that's appropriate, given the circumstances. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the campus that his company had built. Marcus, let me tell you something about leadership. The best decisions aren't made in boardrooms by people reviewing resumes and performance metrics. They're made when you see someone's true character in action. He turned back to face Marcus. I've seen your character. You stepped up when my daughter needed help. You were genuine and kind during dinner with your son. And today you demonstrated expertise that frankly surprised everyone in this room. The fact that these 3 things happened to intersect isn't a coincidence. It's who you are. Marcus remained silent, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. I'm not asking you to decide right now, James continued. Take some time to think about it. Talk to Dylan if that helps, but I want you to know that this opportunity is based entirely on your professional merits. The personal connection just gave me insight into the kind of person you are. As Marcus prepared to leave, James made one final comment. Emma asked if she could visit Dylan this weekend to see his volcano project. Would that still be okay? Despite everything that had just transpired, Marcus found himself smiling. Of course, Dylan's been talking about it all week. Good. And Marcus, whatever you decide about the promotion, our family's friendship doesn't have to change. Emma needs positive influences in her life, and you and Dylan have been exactly that. Marcus left the conference room in a daze, his mind spinning with the implications of everything that had just occurred. The elevator ride down to the basement maintenance office seemed to take forever, giving him time to process the complete upheaval of his understanding of the past week. Janet Williams was waiting for him when he reached the maintenance office. So, how did it go? Marcus looked at his supervisor, a woman who had been nothing but supportive during his 3 years at Pinnacle. How could he explain that he'd just been offered her job, essentially, by a man whose daughter he'd helped purely by chance? It went well, he said finally. They seemed interested in my input. That's great, Marcus. You know this stuff better than anyone. I'm proud of how you represented the department. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks that felt surreal given the morning's revelations. Marcus went through the motions of checking work orders and responding to minor maintenance requests, but his mind was entirely focused on the choice he now faced. By the time he picked up Dylan from after-school care, Marcus had run through dozens of scenarios in his head. Each one led to the same conclusion. Accepting the promotion was the right thing for his family's future, regardless of how the opportunity had arisen. "How was your big meeting, Dad?" Dylan asked as they drove home. Marcus glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. This bright, curious boy who deserved every opportunity Marcus could provide for him. "It was very interesting, buddy. Very interesting indeed." That evening, as Marcus helped Dylan with his homework, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad told me you had a meeting at his work today. How crazy is that? He said you were really impressed. I'm so proud that you're my friend." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Life is full of surprises." "Are you still planning to come see Dylan's volcano this weekend?" "Absolutely. I can't wait." As Marcus tucked Dylan into bed that night, his son asked the question that had been weighing on his mind all evening. "Dad, if something really good happened to you at work, but it was complicated, what would you do?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at his son's earnest face. "What do you think I should do?" Dylan considered this seriously. "I think you should do what's best for us, but also what's right. You always tell me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing." Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus kissed his son's forehead and turned out the light, knowing that Dylan had just given him the clarity he needed to make his decision. Thursday morning brought an unexpected nervousness that Marcus couldn't quite shake. The facilities meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., and he'd spent the previous evening reviewing building schematics and maintenance records, wanting to be prepared for whatever questions might come his way. It wasn't often that maintenance staff were included in high-level planning discussions, and he didn't want to waste the opportunity to represent his department well. Dylan had noticed his father's distraction over breakfast. "You seem worried." "About something, Dad?" Marcus ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "Just a big meeting at work today, buddy. Nothing to worry about." "Will you tell me about it tonight?" "Absolutely," Marcus promised, though he had no idea how eventful that conversation would turn out to be. The morning passed quickly with routine maintenance tasks. Marcus replaced a malfunctioning card reader in Building B, responded to a minor plumbing issue in the executive break room, and completed his weekly inspection of the backup generator systems. Normal work that kept his hands busy while his mind wandered to the upcoming meeting. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus made his way to the 15th floor, carrying a folder with building system diagrams and his maintenance log summaries. The elevator ride seemed longer than usual, and he found himself checking his appearance in the polished steel doors. His work uniform was clean and pressed, his tool belt left behind in favor of a more professional appearance. The executive conference room was already occupied when he arrived. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see approximately 15 people seated around the massive mahogany table. Most were familiar faces from the upper management ranks. Sarah Martinez from HR, the chief financial officer whose name he'd never learned, and several department heads he recognized but couldn't name. Janet Williams was waiting for him outside the conference room. "You ready for this, Marcus? Just be yourself and answer their questions honestly. They specifically want practical input about the building systems." Marcus nodded, straightening his shoulders. "What exactly are they planning?" "I'm not entirely sure," Janet admitted. "Something about expanding operations and upgrading facilities. They want to know what our current systems can handle and what would need to be modified." The conference room doors opened and Sarah Martinez emerged to greet them. "Marcus, thank you so much for joining us. Please, come in." Marcus followed her into the room, immediately struck by the formality of the setting. The conference table was surrounded by leather chairs, and the walls featured large monitors displaying what appeared to be architectural plans and financial projections. The afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in a warm, professional glow. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Marcus Chen, our maintenance supervisor," Sarah announced. Marcus has been with Pinnacle for 3 years and has extensive knowledge of our facility systems. Marcus nodded politely as various executives acknowledged his presence. Most seemed genuinely interested in his expertise, though he could sense the invisible barrier between management and labor that existed even in friendly interactions. "Please, have a seat," came a voice from the head of the table. Marcus looked up to see a man in an expensive navy suit gesturing to an empty chair. The man looked familiar, though Marcus couldn't immediately place him. There was something about his bearing and the way others in the room deferred to him that suggested significant authority. As Marcus settled into his chair, the man at the head of the table began speaking. "We're here today to discuss some exciting developments for Pinnacle Technologies. We're planning a significant expansion of our operations, which will require substantial upgrades to our physical infrastructure." Marcus listened attentively as the presentation unfolded. Pinnacle was apparently considering a major acquisition that would bring an additional 3,000 employees to the campus. The current facilities would need extensive modifications to accommodate the increased capacity. "The question we need to answer," the presenter continued, "is whether our existing systems can support this growth, and if not, what modifications would be required." Sarah Martinez turned to Marcus. "This is where your expertise becomes invaluable, Marcus. You know these buildings better than anyone. What's your assessment of our current capacity?" Marcus felt all eyes in the room turn to him. He cleared his throat and opened his folder, grateful for the preparation he'd done the night before. "Our electrical infrastructure is currently operating at about 70% capacity," he began, his voice gaining confidence as he moved into familiar territory. "We could probably handle another 1,000 people without major upgrades, but 3,000 would require significant expansion of the main electrical service." He pulled out a building schematic and pointed to key areas. "The HVAC system is more complex. Buildings A and C could handle increased loads with some modifications to the ductwork and additional units on the roof, but Building B would need a complete system overhaul. The current setup is already struggling during peak summer months." The room was quiet, except for the scratch of pens on notepads. Marcus continued his analysis, covering everything from parking capacity to water, pressure to network infrastructure. His 3 years of hands-on experience with every system in the complex had given him insights that no consultant could match. "What about the timeline for these modifications?" asked the CFO. Marcus considered the question carefully. "If we start immediately, I'd estimate 18 months for the electrical upgrades, maybe 2 years for the complete HVAC overhaul. The key would be sequencing the work to minimize disruption to current operations." "And the cost estimates?" This question came from the man at the head of the table, whose voice carried unmistakable authority. "That's outside my expertise," Marcus admitted, "but I can tell you which systems would need complete replacement versus modification, which would help with accurate cost projections." The presentation continued for another hour, with Marcus fielding detailed questions about everything from backup power systems to emergency evacuation procedures. He found himself increasingly impressed by the scope of the expansion plans. Pinnacle was clearly positioning itself for major growth. As the meeting began to wind down, the man at the head of the table stood up. "Thank you all for your input today. This has been extremely valuable for our planning process." He turned directly to Marcus. "Particularly your insights, Marcus. It's clear that you have a deep understanding of our facilities. Would you be available for follow-up consultations as we develop these plans?" Marcus felt a surge of professional pride. "Of course, sir, whatever you need." The man smiled, extending his hand. "Excellent. I'm James Richardson, by the way, CEO of Pinnacle Technologies." The world seemed to stop. Marcus felt his hand automatically extend to shake James's, but his mind was reeling. James Richardson. CEO. Emma's father was the chief executive officer of Pinnacle Technologies, the man who, quite literally, owned Marcus's job. It's nice to meet you, sir, Marcus managed, his voice somehow remaining steady despite the shock. James's grip was firm, his smile genuine. Actually, Marcus, we've met before. Last Saturday at Millstone Grill, though I suppose the context is a bit different now. The room had fallen quiet, with other attendees clearly sensing some undercurrent they didn't understand. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks as the full implications of the situation hit him. You're Emma's father, Marcus said unnecessarily, his voice barely above a whisper. I am indeed, James replied calmly, and you're the man who protected my daughter from bullies and then had dinner with us. Small world, isn't it? Marcus's mind raced through the events of the past week. The dinner conversation now took on entirely new meaning. James's detailed questions about Pinnacle's systems, his knowledge of the building operations, his careful evaluation of Marcus's expertise. It all made sense now. I had no idea, Marcus said, feeling foolish for stating the obvious. James's expression softened slightly. Of course you didn't. How could you? I'm sorry for not introducing myself properly at dinner, but honestly, it was refreshing to have a conversation without the weight of corporate hierarchy involved. Sarah Martinez was watching this exchange with obvious confusion. I'm sorry, but could someone explain what's happening here? James addressed the room without taking his eyes off Marcus. It turns out that Marcus here recently helped my daughter, Emma, when she was having some trouble at school. We had dinner together last weekend, though neither of us realized the connection to Pinnacle at the time. The room buzzed with murmurs of surprise and interest. Marcus felt exposed, as if everyone was suddenly re-evaluating their perception of him based on this unexpected revelation. That's quite a coincidence, observed the CFO. Indeed it is, James agreed. Though I have to say, everything Marcus shared with us today confirms what I learned about his character last Saturday. He's thorough, knowledgeable, and genuinely cares about doing things right. Marcus felt simultaneously flattered and uncomfortable. The praise was gratifying, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his relationship with Emma and James had somehow compromised his professional integrity. Sir, Marcus began, I want you to know that I had no idea who you were when I helped Emma, and I certainly didn't know during our dinner. James nodded approvingly, which is exactly why your actions mean so much. You helped my daughter because it was the right thing to do, not because you thought it might benefit you professionally. The meeting officially ended a few minutes later, with various executives filing out while discussing the expansion plans in small groups. Marcus found himself alone with James, who had remained seated at the head of the table. This is awkward, Marcus said honestly. James laughed, a sound that seemed to release some of the tension in the room. It doesn't have to be, Marcus. What you did for Emma last week, that meant everything to me. She's been struggling at school, feeling like she doesn't belong anywhere. What you told her about belonging wherever she wants to be, that's changed. Her entire attitude. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I just said what felt right at the moment. Exactly. You saw a young person in trouble and stepped in to help, despite having no obligation to do so. You treated her with respect and dignity when 3 boys were trying to tear down her self-worth. James's voice carried deep emotion. Do you have any idea how rare that kind of character is? I'd hope it's not that rare, Marcus replied. Unfortunately, it is, especially in my world. James gestured around the elegant conference room. When you have money and power, you learn quickly who's being genuine and who's performing. You and Dylan were completely authentic with us at dinner. That's precious beyond measure. Marcus felt a new kind of discomfort. Sir, I need you to know that I don't expect any special treatment because of this. I want to earn whatever opportunities come my way. James studied him for a long moment. What if I told you that your performance in today's meeting, your knowledge, your insights, your professionalism, had already earned you something special? What do you mean? We're going to need a director of facilities management for the expansion project. Someone who understands our current systems inside and out. Someone who can oversee the upgrades and modifications. Based on what I heard today, you're the obvious choice. Marcus felt his heart racing. A director-level position would change everything. For him and Dylan, better salary, better benefits, more stability. But accepting it now felt complicated by his relationship with Emma and James. I appreciate the confidence, sir, but I need to think about whether that's appropriate given the circumstances. James stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the campus that his company had built. Marcus, let me tell you something about leadership. The best decisions aren't made in boardrooms by people reviewing resumes and performance metrics. They're made when you see someone's true character in action. He turned back to face Marcus. I've seen your character. You stepped up when my daughter needed help. You were genuine and kind during dinner with your son. And today, you demonstrated expertise that frankly surprised everyone in this room. The fact that these three things happen to intersect isn't a coincidence. It's who you are. Marcus remained silent, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. I'm not asking you to decide right now, James continued. Take some time to think about it. Talk to Dylan if that helps. But I want you to know that this opportunity is based entirely on your professional merits. The personal connection just gave me insight into the kind of person you are. As Marcus prepared to leave, James made one final comment. Emma asked if she could visit Dylan this weekend to see his volcano project. Would that still be okay? Despite everything that had just transpired, Marcus found himself smiling. Of course. Dylan's been talking about it all week. Good. And Marcus, whatever you decide about the promotion, our family's friendship doesn't have to change. Emma needs positive influences in her life, and you and Dylan have been exactly that. Marcus left the conference room in a daze, his mind spinning with the implications of everything that had just occurred. The elevator ride down to the basement maintenance office seemed to take forever, giving him time to process the complete upheaval of his understanding of the past week. Janet Williams was waiting for him when he reached the maintenance office. So, how did it go? Marcus looked at his supervisor, a woman who had been nothing but supportive during his 3 years at Pinnacle. How could he explain that he'd just been offered her job, essentially, by a man whose daughter he'd helped purely by chance? It went well, he said finally. They seemed interested in my input. That's great, Marcus. You know this stuff better than anyone. I'm proud of how you represented the department. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks. That felt surreal, given the morning's revelations. Marcus went through the motions of checking work orders and responding to minor maintenance requests, but his mind was entirely focused on the choice he now faced. By the time he picked up Dylan from after-school care, Marcus had run through dozens of scenarios in his head. Each one led to the same conclusion. Accepting the promotion was the right thing for his family's future, regardless of how the opportunity had arisen. "How was your big meeting, Dad?" Dylan asked as they drove home. Marcus glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, this bright, curious boy who deserved every opportunity Marcus could provide for him. "It was very interesting, buddy. Very interesting indeed." That evening, as Marcus helped Dylan with his homework, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad told me you had a meeting at his work today. How crazy is that? He said you were really impressed. I'm so proud that you're my friend." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Life is full of surprises. Are you still planning to come see Dylan's volcano this weekend?" "Absolutely. I can't wait." As Marcus tucked Dylan into bed that night, his son asked the question that had been weighing on his mind all evening. "Dad, If something really good happened to you at work, but it was complicated, what would you do? Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at his son's earnest face. What do you think I should do? Dylan considered this seriously. I think you should do what's best for us, but also what's right. You always tell me that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus kissed his son's forehead and turned out the light, knowing that Dylan had just given him the clarity he needed to make his decision. Friday morning brought an unusual energy to the Pinnacle Technologies campus. Word had spread through the maintenance department about Marcus's participation in the high-level facilities meeting, though the full details remained mysterious. His colleagues peppered him with questions over coffee, but Marcus deflected most of them, still processing the magnitude of Thursday's revelations. "Come on, Marcus," teased Tommy Rodriguez, one of the younger maintenance technicians. "You disappear into the executive suite for 2 hours and come back looking like you've seen a ghost. What really happened up there?" Marcus managed a smile while checking his work orders for the day. "Just boring facilities planning stuff. You know how these corporate types love their meetings." But there was nothing boring about the message waiting on his desk from James Richardson's executive assistant. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Richardson would like to schedule a brief follow-up meeting at your convenience to discuss yesterday's facilities consultation. Please call to arrange a time that works with your schedule." The formal tone couldn't disguise the personal nature of the request. Marcus knew this wasn't about building systems or expansion plans. This was about the job offer and the complex relationship between their families. He spent the morning replacing faulty lighting fixtures in the Building C lobby, a routine task that normally helped him think clearly. But today, his mind kept cycling through the same questions. Could he accept a promotion that came about because he'd helped the CEO's daughter? Would other employees think he'd gotten special treatment? Most importantly, was he qualified for such a significant step up in responsibility? Around 11 a.m., his radio crackled with Janet Williams' voice. "Marcus, can you come to the maintenance office? There's someone here to see you." Marcus finished installing the last light fixture and made his way downstairs, wondering if James had decided to visit the maintenance department personally. Instead, he found Emma Richardson sitting in the small waiting area, looking nervous but determined. "Emma, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in school?" Emma stood up quickly, smoothing down her Westfield High uniform. "I have a free period, and Dad said I could visit for a few minutes. I wanted to talk to you about something important." Janet Williams emerged from her office, looking bemused. "She showed up about 10 minutes ago, asked for you specifically, said it was about a school project." Marcus shot Emma a questioning look, but she maintained her innocent expression. "Thanks, Janet. We'll just step outside for a minute." They walked to a quiet courtyard between buildings, where concrete benches sat among carefully maintained landscaping. Emma seemed to be gathering her courage, and Marcus waited patiently for her to speak. "I know what happened yesterday," she said. "Finally, Dad told me about the meeting and the job offer. I wanted to make sure you knew that I think you should take it." Marcus was touched by her concern, but also surprised by her directness. "Emma, that's very sweet, but this is really between your father and me." "No, it's not," Emma said firmly, showing the same determination that had helped her excel academically despite social challenges. "It's about all of us. You helped me when no one else would, and now Dad wants to help you, but I can see you're worried about it being fair or appropriate." She sat down on one of the benches and Marcus joined her. The November air was crisp but pleasant, and the midday sun provided enough warmth to make their outdoor conversation comfortable. "Marcus, can I tell you something about my dad that you probably don't know?" Marcus nodded, curious about this perspective from someone who knew James as a father rather than a CEO. 5 years ago, when Dad was promoted to CEO, he made a promise to himself and to me. He said he was going to run Pinnacle in a way that recognized people's real value, not just their titles or degrees. He's been looking for opportunities to promote people based on their character and abilities, rather than just their resumes. Emma paused, looking out at the landscape grounds. What you did for me last week, stepping in to help a stranger's kid, that showed him exactly the kind of person he wants in leadership positions. The fact that you also happen to be incredibly knowledgeable about the building systems was just a bonus. Marcus felt some of his reservations beginning to ease. But people will talk, Emma. They'll think I got special treatment because of our personal connection. Maybe some will, Emma agreed. But the people who matter, the ones you'll be working with closely, were in that meeting yesterday. They heard your presentation. Dad said everyone was impressed by your expertise and professionalism. She turned to face him directly. Besides, if you turn down this opportunity, you're not just affecting yourself. You're affecting Dylan, too. Don't you think he deserves to have a father who can provide better opportunities for his future? The comment hit home more than Emma probably realized. Marcus had been so focused on the ethical implications of accepting the promotion that he'd almost lost sight of what it could mean for Dylan's life. Better salary, better benefits, more stability, and the possibility of college savings that actually made a difference. "You're pretty wise for a 14-year-old, Marcus said with a smile. Emma grinned back. "Dad says I get that from spending too much time around adults. Speaking of which, I should probably get back to school before someone notices I'm missing." As they walked back toward the main buildings, Emma added one more thought. "Marcus, you told me I belong anywhere I want to be. Maybe it's time you started believing that about yourself too." After Emma left, Marcus found himself with a new perspective on his situation. The teenager's straightforward assessment had cut through much of his overthinking. This wasn't about charity or special treatment. It was about recognizing potential and character in unconventional places. He called James Richardson's assistant and scheduled a meeting for 4 p.m. that afternoon. The rest of the day passed quickly. Marcus completed his remaining work orders with unusual efficiency, his mind already shifting into the broader thinking that would be required in a director-level position. He found himself noticing inefficiencies and improvement opportunities that he'd never paid attention to before. At 4 p.m. sharp, Marcus knocked on the door of James Richardson's corner office. The space was impressive, but not ostentatious. Large windows overlooking the campus, comfortable seating areas, and walls lined with awards and photos documenting Pinnacle's growth over the years. "Marcus, thank you for coming," James said, rising from behind his desk. "Please have a seat. Can I get you coffee or water?" "I'm fine, thank you," Marcus replied, settling into one of the leather chairs across from James's desk. James leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with the same intensity he'd shown during their dinner conversation. "I imagine you've had some time to think about our discussion yesterday." "I have," Marcus confirmed, "and I've made a decision." James raised an eyebrow but didn't speak, waiting for Marcus to continue. "I'd like to accept the position, with one condition." "What's that?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I want this to be handled completely transparently. I don't want any special considerations or shortcuts in the transition process. If I'm going to be director of facilities management, I want to earn the respect of the people I'll be working with." James smiled broadly. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. What did you have in mind?" "A formal interview process with the other department heads who were in yesterday's meeting. Performance benchmarks for the first 6 months. And I want to work closely with Janet Williams during the transition. She's been an excellent supervisor. And I don't want this to create any problems for her position." James nodded approvingly. "All reasonable requests. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you hadn't thought about these details. It shows you understand the complexity of leadership transitions." They spent the next hour discussing the specifics of the role, the timeline for the expansion project, and the professional development opportunities that would come with the position. Marcus was impressed by James's detailed knowledge of the facility's operations and his thoughtful approach to organizational change. "There's one more thing," James said as their meeting wound down. "Emma is planning to visit Dylan this weekend to see his volcano project. I hope that's still acceptable, regardless of our professional relationship." Marcus smiled. "Of course. Dylan's been working on his presentation all week. I think he's more excited about showing Emma than he is about the actual science fair." "Good. It's important to both Emma and me that our families can maintain their friendship independent of any business considerations." As Marcus prepared to leave, James stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the leadership team, Marcus. I have a feeling this is going to work out very well for everyone involved." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made outdoor activities irresistible. Dylan had spent the morning adding finishing touches to his volcano model, carefully painting the papier-mâché mountain and arranging the plastic dinosaurs around its base. "Do you think Emma will really be impressed?" Dylan asked for the third time as they set up the demonstration in their small backyard. "I think she's going to love it," Marcus assured him. "Remember, Emma takes advanced science classes with high school kids. She'll appreciate the work you put into getting the chemical reaction just right." Emma and James arrived at 2 p.m., and Dylan immediately took charge of the presentation. He explained the geological principles behind volcanic eruptions, demonstrated the chemical reaction between baking soda and vinegar, and fielded Emma's sophisticated questions with the confidence of someone who'd thoroughly researched his subject. "This is amazing, Dylan," Emma said as the volcano erupted for the second time. "Have you thought about adding different colored reactions? You could use food coloring to simulate different types of volcanic material." Dylan's eyes lit up with excitement. "Could we try that now?" Marcus watched from the sidelines as Emma and Dylan experimented with different variations of the eruption, their age difference becoming irrelevant in the face of shared scientific curiosity. James stood beside him, both fathers enjoying the sight of their children learning together. "It's remarkable how well they connect," James observed. "Emma hasn't shown this much enthusiasm about anything school-related in months." "Dylan's the same way," Marcus replied. "He keeps asking when Emma can visit again." They moved inside for snacks and hot chocolate, the conversation flowing easily between topics ranging from school projects to weekend plans. The corporate hierarchy that had seemed so important during the week faded into irrelevance as they simply enjoyed each other's company as families. "Dad told me about your new job," Emma said to Marcus during a quiet moment while Dylan was explaining his art projects to James. "I'm really happy for you. Dylan must be excited." Marcus glanced over at his son, who was animatedly describing his latest drawing to James. "I haven't told him yet. I wanted to wait until the official announcement. On Monday, he's going to be so proud," Emma said with certainty. "You're already the best dad in the world to him, but now everyone else will see how special you are too." As the afternoon wound down, James and Emma prepared to leave. Dylan extracted a promise from Emma to help him with his next science project, and Emma agreed to teach him about some of the advanced chemistry concepts she was learning in her accelerated classes. "Same time next weekend?" James asked as they walked to his car. "Absolutely," Marcus replied. "Dylan's already planning his next demonstration." After their guests left, Dylan helped Marcus clean up the backyard, chattering excitedly about Emma's suggestions for improving his volcano model. "Dad," Dylan said as they carried the experiment materials inside, "I really like Emma and Mr. Richardson. Can they be part of our family now?" Marcus smiled at his son's straightforward approach to relationships. "They're definitely our friends. Buddy, very good friends." "Good. I was thinking Emma could be like my big sister and Mr. Richardson could be like another dad." "Not instead of you," Dylan added quickly, "but like an extra dad for when you're at work." That evening, as Marcus tucked Dylan into bed, He reflected on the remarkable series of events that had brought them to this point. A simple act of kindness in a rain-soaked parking lot had led to friendship, professional opportunity, and a new extended family that none of them had expected. "Dad?" Dylan's sleepy voice interrupted his thoughts. "Yes, buddy. I'm glad you helped Emma that day. She needed a friend, and now we have her forever." Marcus kissed his son's forehead, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of 8-year-old logic. "Me too, Dylan. Me too." Monday morning brought the official announcement of Marcus's promotion to Director of Facilities Management. The news was met with surprise by some colleagues, but the professional manner in which James Richardson had handled the transition helped minimize any negative speculation. Janet Williams was the first to congratulate him, her genuine happiness about his advancement dispelling any concerns about departmental politics. "You've earned this, Marcus," she said firmly. "I've watched you work for 3 years, and you understand these facilities better than anyone. Don't let anyone tell you differently." As Marcus settled into his new office, still modest compared to the executive suites, but a significant upgrade from the basement maintenance area, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. It had started with a crying teenager and a moral choice that seemed obvious at the time, but it had led to opportunities he'd never imagined possible. His first official act as director was to implement a new policy. Any Pinnacle employee who witnessed bullying or harassment, whether at work or in the community, would be supported in their intervention efforts. It seemed like a fitting way to honor the experience that had changed all their lives. That afternoon, Emma texted him from school. "Heard about your promotion. Those mean boys saw the announcement in the local business section. Their parents all work for companies that do business with Pinnacle. They've been much nicer to me today. Funny how respect works, isn't it?" Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Respect should never depend on job titles, but I'm glad you're having a better day. See you Saturday for Dylan's next experiment." "Wouldn't miss it. We're family now, remember?" As Marcus looked out the window of his new office at the campus he now helped oversee, he realized that Emma was right. They were a family now. A family built not on blood or legal documents, but on the connections forged when people choose to see the best in each other and act with courage when it matters most. It was, he reflected, the best kind of family there was. 3 months into his new role as Director of Facilities Management, Marcus had settled into a rhythm that balanced his expanded responsibilities with the hands-on work he'd always loved. The corner office still felt surreal some mornings, but the challenges of overseeing Pinnacle's massive expansion project kept him grounded in practical problem-solving. The merger James had mentioned during that first facilities meeting was now moving forward rapidly. Pinnacle Technologies was acquiring Meridian Systems, a software development company based in Portland, and their 800 employees would be relocating to the expanded campus by summer. Marcus found himself at the center of a multi-million-dollar construction project that would add 2 new buildings and completely renovate the existing infrastructure. The electrical contractors want to start Phase 2 of the power grid upgrades next week, announced Lisa Chen, his new assistant, as she brought him his morning coffee and project updates. Lisa wasn't related to him despite sharing his surname. She was a recent business school graduate who'd been assigned to help manage the complex logistics of the expansion. Marcus reviewed the timeline on his computer screen, cross-referencing it with the HVAC installation schedule. "That should work, as long as the permits come through by Friday. Have you heard anything from the city planning office?" "I'll call them this morning," Lisa promised, making notes on her tablet. "Also, Mr. Richardson's office called. He'd like to schedule a project review meeting for Thursday afternoon." These regular check-ins with James had become routine, though Marcus still marveled at how naturally their professional relationship had evolved alongside their personal friendship. James's leadership style emphasized collaboration and transparency, making it easy to separate business discussions from family interactions. The morning flew by in a series of contractor meetings, budget reviews, and site inspections. Marcus walked the construction zones daily, his maintenance background proving invaluable as he caught potential problems before they became expensive mistakes. The crews had learned to respect his practical expertise, and several had commented that it was refreshing to work with a facilities director who actually understood how buildings functioned. Around 11 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you can come to parent-teacher conferences next week. She says she has very exciting news about my grades." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Of course. Schedule it for whatever time works best. I'm proud of you, buddy." Dylan's academic performance had soared since Marcus's promotion. The reduced financial stress and increased stability at home had freed up mental energy that Dylan was channeling into his schoolwork. More importantly, the boy's confidence had grown as he watched his father succeed in new challenges. The lunch hour brought an unexpected visitor. Emma Richardson appeared in his office doorway, her Westfield High uniform indicating she was on her lunch break. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," she said, though her smile suggested she knew she was always welcome. "Never," Marcus replied, gesturing for her to sit down. "What brings you to the corporate world today?" Emma settled into one of the chairs across from his desk, looking more mature than her 15 years. The past few months had been transformative for her as well. The bullying incident seemed like ancient history now, replaced by a growing circle of friends who appreciated her intelligence and kindness. "I wanted to run something by you before I talked to Dad about it," Emma said. "You know how we've been doing those science experiments with Dylan every weekend?" Marcus nodded. The Saturday afternoon gatherings had become a cherished tradition for both families, with Emma and Dylan collaborating on increasingly sophisticated projects that combined her advanced theoretical knowledge with his enthusiastic curiosity. "Well, Dylan mentioned that some of his classmates have been asking if they could join us sometime, and I was thinking, what if we started a real science club for younger kids, something that meets here at Pinnacle on weekends?" The idea was intriguing. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the possibilities. "Tell me more about what you're envisioning." Emma's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "We could use one of the conference rooms, or maybe that big space in Building C that's being renovated. I could teach basic chemistry and physics concepts, and Dylan could help demonstrate that science is fun, not scary. We could invite kids from both our schools." "That's a wonderful idea, Emma. Have you thought about the logistics, insurance, supervision, materials?" "That's why I wanted to talk to you first," Emma admitted. "I figured you'd know how to make something like this work practically, and I thought maybe some of the Pinnacle employees might want to volunteer, like a community outreach program." Marcus felt a surge of pride at Emma's thoughtful approach. She'd inherited her father's ability to think strategically while maintaining genuine care for others. "Let me talk to James about it. I think he'd be very interested in a program like this." Emma beamed. "Really? You think Dad would go for it?" "Think your father would be thrilled to see Pinnacle involved in educational outreach, especially when it's his daughter's initiative." After Emma left to return to school, Marcus found himself energized by her proposal. The science club idea aligned perfectly with the values-based leadership James had been promoting throughout the company. It would also provide a meaningful way for Pinnacle to engage with the local community. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Sarah Martinez, who had become one of Marcus's closest allies in the leadership team. She knocked on his office door carrying a stack of personnel files and wearing an expression that suggested important news. "Do you have a few minutes?" Sarah asked. "I wanted to discuss something confidential with you." Marcus gestured for her. to close the door and take a seat. Sarah's role as VP of Human Resources meant that her confidential conversations usually involved significant organizational changes. The board meeting last week covered some interesting developments. Sarah began. James has been advocating for a new position, VP of Operations and Facilities. Essentially, it would oversee your department along with logistics, security, and emergency planning. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. That sounds like a substantial role. It is. And James specifically mentioned that he'd like you to be considered for the position. The magnitude of what Sarah was suggesting hit Marcus like a physical force. Vice president level would put him in the senior executive ranks, with compensation and responsibilities he'd never imagined possible when he was fixing air conditioning units just 6 months ago. Sarah, I appreciate the confidence, but I've only been in my current role for 3 months. Isn't this moving awfully fast? Sarah smiled knowingly. That's exactly the response James predicted you'd have. He asked me to remind you that leadership isn't about time served. It's about capability and character. The expansion project has shown everyone that you possess both in abundance. She leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. Marcus, I've been with this company for 8 years. I've seen a lot of people get promoted based on politics, connections, or pure luck. What you've accomplished in 3 months is extraordinary. The construction project is ahead of schedule and under budget. Employee satisfaction in facilities, services has reached an all-time high, and you've earned respect across every department. Marcus absorbed this information, feeling simultaneously honored and overwhelmed. What would the timeline be for something like this? That depends partly on you. James wants to announce organizational changes at the quarterly board meeting. In 6 weeks. If you're interested, we'd need to start the formal evaluation process soon. After Sarah left, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring out at the construction site where workers were installing steel beams for the new Building D. 6 months ago, he'd been watching similar construction from ground level, concerned primarily with keeping the work areas clean and safe. Now he was being offered the opportunity to oversee operations for the entire corporate campus. His phone rang, interrupting his contemplation. Dylan's school was calling. Mr. Chen, this is Principal Williams at Millbrook Elementary. Everything's fine, the voice said quickly, but we wanted to let you know that Dylan had a small incident at recess today. Marcus's parental instincts kicked in immediately. What kind of incident? Actually, it was quite positive. Dylan saw some 5th grade boys picking on a 2nd grader and intervened to help. He handled the situation very maturely, and we wanted to commend both him and you for the values you're clearly teaching at home. Marcus felt a wave of pride wash over him. Is everyone okay? Everyone's fine. Dylan made sure the younger boy got to the nurse's office to clean up some scraped knees, and then he stayed with him until his teacher came. The 5th graders involved will be having conversations with their parents about appropriate behavior. After hanging up, Marcus realized that Dylan's actions perfectly mirrored his own intervention with Emma just months earlier. The boy was learning that standing up for others wasn't just the right thing to do. It was a fundamental responsibility of anyone with the ability to help. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Marcus's mind kept returning to Sarah's offer and Dylan's playground heroics. Both situations reinforced the same lesson. Leadership opportunities arise when you demonstrate character consistently, whether in corporate boardrooms or elementary school playgrounds. At 6 p.m., Marcus picked up Dylan from after-school care. Eager to hear his son's version of the recess incident. Mrs. Patterson said you helped someone today, Marcus said as they drove home. Dylan nodded seriously. Tommy Jenkins was crying because some big kids took his lunch money and pushed him down. I remembered what you told Emma about belonging anywhere she wants to be, and I thought Tommy should belong on the playground without being scared. What did you do? I told the big kids to give Tommy his money back and leave him alone. When? They said no. I said I was going to get Mrs. Patterson unless they stopped being mean. Marcus glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, marveling at the boy's natural sense of justice. Were you scared? Dylan considered this question carefully. A little bit. But you always say that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing, even when you are scared. That evening, as they shared dinner in their apartment, which Marcus had been considering upgrading, though he wanted to make sure any changes felt earned rather than rushed, his phone rang with a call from James Richardson. I hope I'm not interrupting family time, James said, but I wanted to discuss something with you. Emma came home very excited about a science club proposal she discussed with you today. Marcus smiled. She's got a great idea. I was planning to call you about it tomorrow. Actually, that's not the only thing I wanted to talk about. Sarah Martinez mentioned she spoke with you this afternoon about some potential organizational changes. Marcus felt his stomach tighten slightly. She did. It's certainly an interesting opportunity. I hope you'll consider it seriously, Marcus. I know it might seem like rapid advancement, but I want you to understand something. This isn't about our personal relationship or what you did for Emma. This is about what you've proven you can accomplish professionally. James paused, and Marcus could hear the sincerity in his voice. The board has been unanimously impressed with your work on the expansion project. Your department's performance metrics are exceptional, and your collaborative approach has improved. Working relationships across multiple divisions, these are the qualifications that matter for senior leadership. I appreciate the confidence, James. I really do. But I also want to make sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility. What if I told you that readiness isn't about feeling completely prepared? What if I told you that the best leaders are the ones who approach new challenges with humility and determination to grow? Marcus looked across the kitchen table at Dylan, who was working on homework with the focused determination that had become his trademark. This boy deserved every opportunity that Marcus's success could provide. Can I think about it over the weekend? Of course. Take all the time you need. But Marcus, don't overthink this. Trust your instincts. They've served you well so far. Saturday morning brought the usual excitement of Emma's visit for the weekly science experiment session. But this week, Dylan had invited his new friend Tommy Jenkins to join them, along with 2 other classmates who had expressed interest in Emma's teaching style. Marcus watched from the kitchen window as Emma supervised an experiment involving color changing, chemical reactions, explaining complex molecular concepts in terms that 8-year-olds could understand and enjoy. Her natural teaching ability was remarkable, and the children hung on her every word. When James arrived to pick up Emma, he found the backyard transformed into an outdoor laboratory where 5 elementary school children were conducting supervised experiments under the guidance of his 15-year-old daughter. This is incredible, James said quietly to Marcus as they watched the enthusiastic young scientists. Look how engaged they are. Emma's a natural teacher, Marcus replied. She makes complex ideas accessible without dumbing them down. James nodded thoughtfully. This science club idea of hers could really be something special. What would it take to make it happen? Over the next hour, as the children continued their experiments, Marcus and James sketched out the logistics of a weekly science program at Pinnacle. They identified space, discussed insurance requirements, and talked about recruiting volunteer supervisors from among the company's many employees with technical backgrounds. This could be our first major community outreach initiative, James said. Pinnacle Technologies supports local education through hands-on learning opportunities. As the afternoon wound down and the visiting children were picked up by their parents, Emma helped Dylan clean up the experimental materials while the two fathers continued planning. "You know," Emma said to Dylan as they carefully packed away the chemistry supplies, "if this science club really happens, you could be one of the student assistants. You're really good at explaining things to other kids." Dylan's face lit up with excitement. "Really? I could help teach?" "Absolutely. The best teachers are the ones who remember what it's like to learn something new." That evening, after Emma and James had gone home, Marcus sat with Dylan on their small balcony, looking out over the city lights. The boy was still buzzing with excitement about the possibility of helping with a real science club. "Dad," Dylan said thoughtfully, "do you think people can change their whole lives just by being kind to someone?" Marcus considered the question, thinking about the remarkable chain of events that had started with helping a crying teenager in a parking lot. "What do you think, buddy?" "I think kindness is like those chemical reactions Emma shows us. You mix the right ingredients together, and something completely new happens." Marcus pulled his son closer, overwhelmed by the wisdom of childhood observations. "That's a very smart way to think about it. So if someone offered you a chance to help even more people by taking a bigger job, you'd probably say yes, right?" Marcus looked down at his son, wondering how much Dylan had understood about the opportunities that were presenting themselves. "Why do you ask?" Dylan shrugged with 8-year-old nonchalance. "I just think you're the kind of person who should have a job where you can help lots of people, like how Emma helps us understand science, but bigger." On Sunday morning, Marcus called James Richardson and accepted the promotion to Vice President of Operations and Facilities. His decision was based on Dylan's simple wisdom: when you have the ability to help more people, you take that opportunity. The announcement would be made at the quarterly board meeting in 6 weeks, giving Marcus time to prepare for the transition, and ensuring that the promotion was handled with the same transparency that had characterized his entire journey at Pinnacle. As he hung up the phone, Marcus realized that his life had become a testament to the power of small acts of courage. Helping one teenager had led to opportunities he'd never imagined, but more importantly, it had connected him with a chosen family that enriched every aspect of his and Dylan's lives. The science club would launch in 4 weeks, with Emma as the lead instructor and Dylan as her enthusiastic assistant. Pinnacle Technologies would provide the space, materials, and volunteer supervisors, creating a program that embodied the values-based leadership James had been promoting throughout the company. Marcus Chen, former maintenance worker turned senior executive, understood that true success wasn't measured in job titles or salary increases. It was measured in the positive impact you had on other people's lives and the courage you showed when others needed help. And by that measure, his life was rich beyond anything he could have imagined when he first heard a teenage girl crying in a rain-soaked parking lot. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the gleaming new auditorium of Building D, watching as 50 local children participated in the first annual Pinnacle Technologies Science Fair. The program that had started with Emma, teaching Dylan about chemical reactions, had grown into something neither family could have imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma announced from the stage, now 16 and poised beyond her years, "welcome to our celebration of young scientists and their amazing discoveries." Marcus smiled from his position near the back of the auditorium. As Vice President of Operations and Facilities, he could have claimed a VIP seat, but he preferred watching from where he could see the audience's reactions. Parents, teachers, and Pinnacle employees filled the space, their faces reflecting genuine amazement at the projects on display. Dylan, now 9 and Emma's official assistant instructor, stepped up to the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd found his calling. "Today, we're going to show you that science isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about understanding how everything in our world connects." The presentation began with the youngest participants, 6-year-olds who'd learned to create rainbow reactions in test tubes. Each child explained their project with the enthusiasm that only comes from genuine understanding, their words showing Emma's influence in making complex concepts accessible. James Richardson sat in the front row, his CEO responsibilities temporarily forgotten as he watched his daughter facilitate learning with natural grace. The Science Club had become one of Pinnacle's most celebrated community initiatives, earning recognition from the State Education Department and inspiring similar programs at other companies. Mr. Chen, a woman approached Marcus during the intermission between presentations. I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, Dean of the Education Program at State University. I've been following your science outreach program with great interest. Marcus shook her hand, curious about her purpose. It's been an incredible journey. Emma Richardson deserves all the credit for the vision. Actually, I wanted to discuss something with both of you. We're launching a new initiative to place advanced high school students in teaching roles with younger children. Emma's work here would be perfect for our pilot program. She could earn college credit while continuing to inspire these young scientists. The idea intrigued Marcus, though he knew the decision would ultimately rest with Emma and James. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. Have you spoken with the Richardsons about it? I wanted to get your perspective first. The program would require a faculty mentor, and frankly, your transformation from maintenance worker to senior executive while maintaining these community connections makes you uniquely qualified. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of unexpected opportunities arising from genuine commitment to helping others. I'd be honored to discuss it further. The second half of the science fair showcased the older participants, including several high school students who joined the program after seeing Emma's work. Tommy Jenkins, the boy Dylan had defended on the playground, presented a sophisticated project on renewable energy that drew applause from the professional engineers in the audience. As the presentations concluded, Emma took the stage for closing remarks. When this program started, it was just me trying to help one smart 8-year-old understand that science could be fun. But what we've learned is that when you share knowledge with genuine care, you create something much bigger than education. You create community. She gestured toward the audience. Every person here, student, parent, teacher, or volunteer, has contributed to proving that learning happens best when people support each other. Thank you for making this dream become reality. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus noticed that Emma's eyes sought out Dylan first, then him, then her father. The bonds forged in that rain-soaked parking lot had created something lasting and meaningful. After the event, as families gathered in the lobby for refreshments, Marcus found himself in conversation with Pete Rodriguez, the security guard who'd become one of the program's most dedicated volunteers. You know what's amazing about all this? Pete said, gesturing around the bustling lobby. My daughter Maria was one of those kids too shy to speak up in regular classes, but here, with Emma's encouragement, she's become confident enough to explain complex chemistry to adults. Marcus nodded, understanding Pete's gratitude. The science program had revealed hidden potential in dozens of children who might otherwise have remained invisible in traditional educational settings. Mr. Marcus, Dylan appeared at his elbow, still glowing with excitement from the presentations. Dr. Williams wants to talk to Emma about teaching at the university. Can you believe it? The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, but Marcus also detected a note of concern. What's wrong, buddy? Dylan's expression grew thoughtful. If Emma goes to college, will she still be able to teach us? I mean, I know I'm getting older, but there are always new kids who need to learn that science is amazing. Marcus knelt down to Dylan's eye level, struck once again by his son's capacity for thinking beyond himself. You know what, Dylan? I think Emma's taught you enough that you could start helping with the younger kids yourself. You've got her gift for making complicated things understandable. Dylan's face brightened. Really? You think I could be a real teacher like Emma? I think you already are. As the evening wound down, the Richardson and Chen families found themselves alone in the auditorium, looking out at the empty stage where so much learning and joy had been shared. "I have something to tell everyone," Emma announced, her voice carrying a new maturity. "Dr. Williams offered me early admission to State University's education program. I could start taking college courses next fall while finishing high school." James's pride was evident, though Marcus detected a trace of parental concern about his daughter growing up so quickly. "What do you want to do?" James asked gently. Emma looked at Dylan, then at Marcus, then at her father. "I want to accept the offer, but only if we can structure it so I can keep working with our science club. These kids have become like family to me." Dylan immediately piped up. "I can help. I know all the experiments now, and I'm good at explaining things to younger kids." Marcus felt a surge of pride at his son's eagerness to step into greater responsibility. That sounds like a perfect partnership. 3 months later, Marcus received a call that would bring the story full circle. Westfield High School was implementing a new anti-bullying program and wanted Pinnacle Technologies to sponsor a speaker series about courage and intervention. "We'd like you to be our first speaker," Principal Anderson explained. "Your story about helping Emma has become somewhat legendary among our students. We want them to understand that one person's courage can change everything." Marcus accepted the invitation, though he insisted that Emma and Dylan join him for the presentation. The story belonged to all of them. On the day of the speaking engagement, Marcus stood before an auditorium full of teenagers, many of whom reminded him of Emma. During those difficult early days at Westfield, he began with the simple truth that had guided all his decisions. "2 years ago, I was walking through a parking lot in the rain when I heard someone crying. I had a choice, mind my own business or get involved. I chose to get involved, and that choice changed my life, my son's life, and the life of the girl I helped." He gestured toward Emma and Dylan, who sat in the front row. "But here's what I've learned. The choice to help someone isn't really about changing their life. It's about becoming the kind of person you want to be." Emma took the stage next, sharing her perspective on receiving help when she needed it most. "Marcus didn't know who my father was, or whether helping me would benefit him in any way. He helped because it was right. That taught me that my worth isn't determined by my family's status or wealth. It's determined by how I treat other people." Dylan concluded the presentation with the wisdom of an 11-year-old who'd grown up watching kindness create opportunities. "My dad always says that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are scared. And the cool thing about being brave is that it's contagious. When you see someone else being brave, it makes you want to be brave too." As they left Westfield High that afternoon, Marcus reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun in that same parking lot. He was now overseeing a $40 million expansion project. Dylan was thriving academically and socially, and Emma was preparing for early admission to college while continuing to inspire young scientists. But perhaps most importantly, they had created a chosen family, bound by shared values rather than circumstance. They had proven that when you choose courage over comfort, kindness over indifference, and action over apathy, you don't just change one life, you create ripple effects that touch everyone around you. That evening, as Marcus and Dylan worked together on homework at their kitchen table, they'd finally moved to a larger apartment, though Marcus had been careful to choose something that felt earned rather than extravagant. Dylan asked the question that had been on his mind all day. "Dad, do you think that crying girl in the parking lot knew she was going to change our whole lives?" Marcus smiled, remembering that rain-soaked afternoon that seemed like a lifetime ago. "No, buddy, I don't think any of us knew what we were starting. But that's the beautiful thing about kindness. You never know how far it will travel or how many lives it will touch. Dylan nodded seriously, then returned to his math homework. But Marcus noticed him making notes in the margin of his worksheet, and when he looked closer, he saw that Dylan was writing ideas for next week's science club session. The circle was complete, but the ripples continued to spread. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.